Welcome to the More Than a Collector podcast. I'm your host, Matt Galvin of Straight Race Cards. This podcast is all about highlighting collectors' stories, where our aim is to go beyond the cards and understand the purpose and heart behind every collector. I hope you can join in on this journey as we run the straight race of life together, recognizing that each collector has their own incredible story worth sharing. I hope this podcast encourages, inspires you, and reminds you that everyone is more than a collector. Hey guys, Matt Straight Race Cards here, and man, I am thrilled this morning for another great episode of More Than a Collector. This morning, I have a guy on here that I just, out of all the people I have met in 2026 in the hobby, I think that this guy has been one of the more special hobby friendships that I've gotten to have and just get to know him better. He is a great man of faith, great man of character, and I think one of the things that I appreciate about him so much is just his earnestness and his, willingness to speak truth and wisdom and great counsel. And so I am so grateful for him. He has really defined what has meant to have true hobby community, and so grateful for him. So I'm going to have him on here. Drew, it's so great to see you, man.
Good morning, Matt. Thank you for having me on. Those are kind words that I'm not sure I can live up to that, but I do appreciate it nonetheless.
Well, you deserve it, brother. And for anyone that doesn't know, we are here early on. This is a Saturday morning and bright and early. I should probably rename this episode like Coffee and Cards or something like that, because this is fun, man. Thanks for getting up early to hang and talk cards and life, man.
No, absolutely, and anytime, absolutely.
Well, I would love, I think, Drew, you just have an incredible story. There's so many facets to how you collect, some of the things you're doing like that connect with collecting as well. I just, think so much of your story, and I think that others would be encouraged to hear it. So I'd love to hear, if you want to start off just sharing your story, how you got into collecting, where has that journey taken you and kind of where you are at now. That'd be fantastic.
Okay, well, my story is like a lot of people, especially at my age range. I just turned 54, and so the first cards I ever even saw was in 1978. I've told the story many a times on YouTube, but my older brother had an accident and he was hospitalized for over a week. And my family came from very humble beginnings. We didn't have extras. We definitely have money for baseball cards, but there's a pastor in our church who went to visit my brother in the hospital and thought, well, what do little boys like? And he brought him a box of baseball cards, like unopened packs. And my brother had never seen them. He opened them, so they were his cards. Well, when he got home, he's sharing them with me, and we are like, what are these things, and I was just becoming conscious of baseball and as a game and as a thing, and my channel name is A Vintage Legacy, and the reason is to me, everyone's got a story. I'm going to ramble here, I apologize, but
Come
everyone's
on.
got a story or a series of stories. Well, when you take all of these stories and you can look at them individually or you look at them collectively, that collective, that's your legacy. That's what people know you as. And for me, it's about family. And so, I at a very young age became aware that my father was a massive baseball fan, when my grandfather, who I idolized, was a massive baseball fan. Both were in New York City. I grew up outside of New York City as a little kid. So this huge era from really the 20s up till whenever, when my grandfather was a little kid, all the way up. Anyway, so these 1978 cards, well, that's all we had for a number of years, was these cards that we got. So we didn't understand complete sets. We didn't understand there's a new set every year. I just knew the 1978 cards, and there were specific cards that I would look over and over the photographs, and I would hear stories about from my father or my uncle, oh, this guy's a great player, and we would look through and try to, oh, we've got him, or I don't know who that is, or whatever. And in the 1978 set, it's the only set that I can think of that Topps on the back actually put a game, where you could play a baseball game based on what's on the back of the cards. I learned a lot of the rules of the game of baseball through the backs of 1978 cards. Anyway,
No kidding. Wow.
so fast forward, moving on. As I got later into the early 80s, I got a little, obviously older, a little bit more freedom, going to the corner store, more friends in a neighborhood, that kind of a thing. And I would start seeing other cards. So I started collecting cards myself. Remember, the first ones were all technically my brother's. Um, and so I started collecting cards and putting sets together. And I was a huge baseball fan. Every single night, I would listen to a game or watch a game if you could. And of course, on TV, being in the New York area, if it was the Mets or the Yankees, you could also see the Cubs or the Braves, because they were on their super stations. And if I couldn't get any of those on radio, I could get Philadelphia, or on a very clear night, believe it or not, I could get Toronto. And so I mean, I had all this baseball daily I could listen to, and I would make my own score sheets on a notebook paper, and keep score. And again, I just learned the game. Anyway, as far as collecting, getting into the late 80s, early 90s, it's now the junk wax era. But at the time, all I knew is this, there was phenomenal. There was so much stuff, and it was all colorful and new, and the innovations. And I went crazy. I picked my guy who was Ken Griffey Jr. I picked my sets, I picked my players, and I would get this. And now I have money, I have a license. I'm going to local shops, I'm buying cards and packs and trading, and so this community started building. At this point now, I was in college, so I was in a different town, a different state, but my collection grew like astronomically. And it got to a point to where, as the hobby exploded in what it was producing, my collection exploded and I could not keep up. And I got to a point to where I was obsessed with trying to collect every Ken Griffey Jr. card, and it got depressing. It not depressing, but it got frustrating, I guess. I could never get them all, and I couldn't afford them anymore. You couldn't just go buy a card for a quarter, 50 cents, or a dollar if it's the good one. Now they're $20 and $30 or 50, 100, and I couldn't keep up, and it was frustrating because the cards that I had spent so much time and money searching for previous years now weren't worth anything. Nobody wanted those, and I was starting to see the cycle of it, and I was losing the draw of the search, the find. And so I didn't really stop collecting, but I stopped obsessing, we'll say, through the mid to late 90s. Um, Keep going, late 90s. I still had my card collection or whatever. I sold off a massive bulk at a yard sale, like literally 30,000 cards that I had put together and all this stuff. And I just sold it because I was like, I'm never going through these again. And I started over. Well, it was about that time where I discovered something called eBay, which is everybody's friend. Okay. And the thing is everything that I had collected up to that point were, at that moment, modern cards. Yes, 78s were technically vintage by the 90s, but they weren't in 78. And I had, gotten the Beckett's like everybody else, and there was two columns of prices, high and low. Well, dealers always wanted high, and you got different discussions of, well, you buy it high, or if a dealer, this is what I sell it for, a low is what you buy it for. I didn't understand grading. I didn't care about grading companies at all. They were very new still. I didn't understand, like, well, the dinged corners mean the value was less or whatever. So to me, looking at a Beckett, I was looking at vintage cards from the 50s or 60s, thinking I could never touch this card because it says it's $1,200. Well, I didn't have $1,200 for anything. Well, with eBay, what I found out very quickly is $1,200 was for like the high end mint copy, so to speak, or near mint, whereas you could get a low dollar, something with writing on the back or creased up or whatever for a fraction of that. And I went. This was my second obsession accumulation phase, and I went nuts on eBay. I was buying because I couldn't believe I could actually get a Yogi Berra card, or a Stam Usual card, or whomever. And then I thought, you know what? I want to build a vintage set because now it was feasible for me. I'm now an adult too, and I have some more money to put into this. So I thought, well, I don't know what set to buy. I didn't really know the different sets in years. So very naively, but it turned out to be a good thought was I knew no matter what, I couldn't afford a Mickey Mantle. So I'm looking through sets and I'm like, hey, 1955 doesn't have a Mickey Mantle in it. I'm going to go for that. It's also a very small set, less than 200 card, right around 200 card, 280, I think. So I start going it thinking, oh yeah, there's that Clemente thing, but I'll get to that. And
Yeah.
so I end up building this set and did get a Clemente. It's another whole great story. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of it, but I did get the Clemente. I had the complete set, and this was my obsession. And what I noticed was, again, I got into this obsession of accumulation, and I just as soon as I can achieve that thing, it's like this euphoria of I've done it. Well, what I did was I got there and there was nobody there to high five me. Nobody cared. You know what I mean? I mean, I had other friends
No.
that kind of collected, but they were like, whatever, you know. And I was like, well, now what? I was looking for this ultimate euphoria of now it's happened, and I realized it just wasn't there. So I ended up selling off most of my 55 set. I kept certain stars. I still have three. I have three cards from that original set, and I've added one back, or I've added two back. So what I currently have is I'm looking at them across the room, but I still have my Clemente, I still have my Koufax, and I still have my Killer Brew. I have added back a Jackie Robinson, and you're going to be happy to know this, and I think you already know, but I also have the Al K line.
Oh,
And
thank God.
yeah, no, and I've shown that card before, and you're like, okay, he's not a total loss. You know, he's got the K line, but
That's right.
those are the five
That's
cards
right.
I have from the set. So then I got into, well, what else could I collect? You know, what's something harder and bigger? And I've always been a history fan, and I love reading and researching and stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to do Hall of Fame run, which is a very common sort of next step thing. So I wanted to act a playing card of every Hall of Famer that played from 1900 on of while they were a player. This is a much bigger, broader, um, uh, goal to go for. Well, this took me years, and but I love that part of that journey because I learned so much about guys I had never heard of. I mean, we all know who Jackie Robinson, or you can say Ty Cobb or Cy Young. You know those names, but I didn't never heard of Chick Hafey. I've never heard of Jim Bottomley or guys like that. And so I'm like, well, they're in the Hall of Fame. Why? And then I found out that these people weren't just. It wasn't just a designation at the end of their name, HOF. They were a person that were revered by their local fans that kids would love to go see. And people wanted to go see not just Dizzy Dean. They wanted to go see Chuck Klein. Well, Chuck Klein, I'm like, who's Chuck Klein? Why is he in the Hall of Fame? And
Yeah.
I know there's this discussion. Well, this guy, was the old, the friendship thing and the buddy system and blah blah blah. But they were all still great players. There's no scrubs in the Hall of Fame. So I learned all this stuff. But again, as I continued on and I was learning, I love that growth part. But as I got closer and it got harder because I had bigger cards to get, I had this goal and it was in this obsessive stage again. And again, when I got my last card, which by the way was Honus Wagner, and I had that card or have that card, I hit that goal. And again, there's nobody to high five me. There's no anything. And it's funny because I had bought the card off of eBay. Um, and at the time, I was debating. I had messaged the guy. The card that I ended up getting was a 1914 Polo Grounds,
Oh, great
um,
set.
and so that was the final card in my Hall of Fame run. And I had messaged the seller, and I was like, "Is there any better price?" And da da da. And he emailed me back and said, "Well, I'm asking this. I had tried to sell it on Net 54, but I'd never gotten any hits on it." And I said, "What's Net 54?" I'd never heard of it. And basically, through this message, he said, "Well, it's a message board for vintage collectors." So I look it up. Sweet. I find this funny, but at this point, I have all but one card. I haven't closed the deal on the Honus Wagner, and I sign up for Net 54, and it says, "What do you want your username to be?" And I'm like, I don't know. I'm so tired. I just know I'm almost done with this collection. And I'm like, you know what? That's my name. Almost done. And so if you go on that 54 and you find almost done, that's me. And the
That's
reason
awesome.
is because I realize as a collector, you're always trying to get that final thing and you are almost done. I'm almost done with this player run. You're almost done with your K-Line run, you know? But once you complete it, then what? There's always got to be something else. We're just always almost done. So that's the way I felt. So that was my username. Well, I completed the deal. I finalized it. But for the first time, I had a community of people that were cheering me on. They didn't know me, but they were cheering me on. And I talked about my collection very early on. This was around 2011. Even Net 54 was fairly new, and I started meeting people virtually, and it was like my first delve into. And I thought this is what I like about cards. It wasn't having them or finding them, that was fun, but there was always a letdown at the end. You know, it was like, well, now what? You know, and what I realized was it's the people. It's people that are like-minded and really love this, that have a passion. And I realized that people didn't necessarily like they wouldn't collect what I collected, but they were still happy for me that I enjoyed it. So I was learning that as an adult to find joy for somebody else who is ecstatic, and you're giving them the high fives because you know that feeling, not because I really wanted that card, but because they really wanted that card. And so my mindset went from internally about what can I get and what can I have and what can I obtain to, well, what did you get and what are you looking for and what can I help you with? And I that was the part of the hobby that really started to change for me. So that kind of takes it up to where I started all the way up to, finding a community on Net 54. Do you want me to continue on till today
Well,
or do you want to
man,
interject?
yeah, I'd love to hear about today. I do have a few. I mean, that's so rich, Drew. There's so much in there. I've got so many questions for you, but the first is, have you end up connecting with that pastor that brought you the sack of 78 cards since he gave
No.
this to you?
No, and so he was at the time he was like an associate pastor, and it's possible I was very young. So in 1978, this happened in the summer, so it was even before my birthday. That means I was only 6 years old, and I remember his name, Peter Bogart. Bogart was his name, um, but he was at the church until about 1980. I think honestly, he was probably in seminary and he was doing an internship because I was from a very, very small little Baptist church up in northern New Jersey. There's no way, looking back now, we could have afforded two full-time pastors. So it's possible or probable he was more than likely doing an internship, and once he had moved on, he got his own church and moved on. Um,
Gotcha.
so so no, I never reconnected. It was just one of the pastors I remembered. And he didn't bring those cards to me. Again, this was all of my brother's stuff. So
It's
um,
true. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's such an interesting point you brought up about just this idea of collecting the almost done, like you get to that euphoria and then you wonder what's next. I've really struggled with that, and I think you brought such great wisdom of shifting that mindset, going from you know focusing on yourself to starting to celebrate and you know really enjoy what other people are doing as well. I feel like that's there's some secret wisdom right there, Drew. That that's wise. I was talking with my wife yesterday about this because I don't want to get into the details yet. There is a potential like game-changing piece to my collection that just popped up, and I was talking to my wife about basically using using everything I have in my card budget and more to go after this piece. And she's extreme. My wife Catherine is extremely wise, and I'm grateful for her in so many ways. But she asked me, she said, "Okay, if you get this piece, what's next? Because there's always going to be that next piece." And it's still honestly a little stinging in a good way. My wife's wisdom. Sometimes good wisdom is a little hurtful in the moment. But I've been really sitting on that of like, okay, like if I were to get this, you know, and the answer is yes. Like, yeah, as a collector, there's definitely things left, but I am really trying to wrestle with like, hey, how can I fight that, constant desire of like, I have to have more, and instead focus on things like you're talking about, like we can, celebrate others, are in, all kinds of different. Is there any other ways you can think of that you have kind of fought that? Um, I don't know if selfish desire is the right word, but fought just like that never-ending cycle of collecting.
Yeah, and it's funny when we were texting back and forth about what to talk about. Hold on, excuse me. I'm fighting a cold, so if I cough or sneeze, I apologize. But
You're good.
you had said, if there was anything that I could think of how to incorporate your faith into how you collect. And I thought, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, I know how I do that. So I'm going to share it. So I actually have my Bible in front of me. I'm going to read a passage. And I know you're familiar with this, but others may not be. But the Apostle Paul in the book of Galatians, chapter 5, talks about something that we now call the fruit of the Spirit. So I'm just going to read this one verse and I'll explain what he's talking about, and then I'll explain how I look at it with my collecting. But chapter 5, verse 22 says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. Against such things there is no law." And what he's talking about is if you have the Spirit of God within you, it not just plants a seed, but it grows within you, and the fruit is the outbearing of it's what people can see to know this tree or this plant is actually being productive. It's the fruit that happens. And I've worked with youth for decades, and one of the things I talk about is a fruit check. And you can say this, or you can say, well, I'm doing this, or I'm living my life this way. But when people look at you, and you're not saying anything, you're not sort of putting on that mask. What's your fruit check? What are they really seeing? What is coming out of you? Are they seeing love, joy, peace, faithfulness, and all those things? Or are they seeing, gossip and bitterness or anger or frustrations or whatever? Because what comes out, I had a girl work for me years and years ago, and she said something that was so profound. She said, if you want to know what's in somebody, you'll find out when they're squeezed. And I
Hmm.
thought that's the truth. When pressure is on, what's coming out? Is it patience and peace and self-control, or is it anger and frustration and angst, and so those are the fruits of the Spirit. Well, I take those and I try, not always successfully, but I try to incorporate that with my collecting. Do I obtain something that I love? Why do I love this thing? Is it something that is just checking off a box, or is it something that I really, really admire for whatever reason? Whether it's got the story, it's got a history, it's got the player, it's got something behind it. There's got to be more than a piece of cardboard with a picture on it that is in a list somewhere. That's just checking boxes. I want to love the card for what it is. Piece. Do I have a piece about it? This can get very, very expensive. You're talking about some item that would take up your yearly budget, and you and I have talked about your yearly budget.
Yeah.
If you make that, are you going to find joy and peace, and are you going to find peace within that? You know what I mean? Are you going to be like, yes, this was the right choice, or are you going to have buyer's regret? And if you are sure, I'm already telling you, you're going to have buyer's regret. You would already know if you have a piece about this is the right thing. If you could be nervous, but that's my sort of thing. But the biggest one, the hardest struggle I've had out of that list is self-control. And I'm gonna tell a story. I talked about eBay, and I was constant and constant and constant, and it was hard to find a balance between too much and how much and all this other stuff. And I was always chasing that completionist in me, the set collector or a player run or whatever. And oh, here's another one, and here's another one, and here's another one, to the point to where there was a point in time where I knew that I was overspending what I should have been overspending. And what I actually did, I'm just being transparent here, but I actually started hiding some purchases from my wife because I just really wanted this card in the item. And then when it would get here, I would always feel this guilt. So then I would have to hide this card. And it got to a point, it wasn't extreme over years, it wasn't thousands of dollars. It doesn't matter. It could have been a 50-cent card. The point is I was choosing my own selfish desire over my relationship with my wife at that moment. And she found out. And I was instantly regretful and sorrowful, and it created a rift at the point that had to be patched. But I decided at that point in time, I'm done with eBay. And I literally canceled my PayPal account and I canceled my eBay account. And I have
Wow.
not bought anything on eBay since. So I use eBay to research. I want to see what a card looks like. What are they kind of going for? I don't buy anything off of those because I had to do that in order to keep myself in check with my self control over what I wanted versus what I would feel the fruits of the spirit, so to speak. Um, but that was years ago. And what I realized was it was actually a peaceful thing. It was frustrating because I wasn't getting those packages constantly and I wasn't finding that stuff, but my collecting slowed, but my joy of what I had and could have grew. And so fast forward, I'm going to continue. You have more questions, or I can continue on with my journey because there's a huge shift that happens
Yeah,
after where I left off.
I was just gonna double click on that. I mean, that is so rich, and so deep of, man, you really doubled down on wanting to battle self-control. You deleted your eBay. I mean, that is, for anyone who's in collecting and listening to this podcast, I mean, that is radical, man. And I'm over here like, man, I don't know if I could do that. And so I am genuinely just very impressed by your fortitude. And also, all this reminds me of, if we go back to scripture, it talks about, with wise counsel, I think there's victory with wise counsel. And it's this idea of, the opposite of hiding purchases. It's this idea of transparency and, wanting to have open conversations with your wife, have open conversations with your community, whether that's like in card collecting or in life. And I think there's so much strength in all of that when we do bring up, like in cards. For me, it's like, hey, I talked to my wife, like I brought up, that piece yesterday. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? She gave me some more blunt thoughts, but I'm grateful. I brought it up to my community group guys yesterday morning as well as we were meeting. Like, hey, just FYI, this popped up. I know you guys aren't in collecting, but it's a chunk of change, and I want to know what you guys think. And had texted a few other friends as well. And so I do think there is really some wisdom of having community, whether it's in the hobby or not, to rally around you and give you wise counsel as we go through our collecting journeys, because we aren't meant to do life alone. And when we're collecting in a silo, to your point, like you said earlier, A, it's not as fun, but B, it's so much more validating when you get something, when you're backed behind community and people, because you can walk in confidence. And I feel like it just gives you peace about that card as well too. And all the things, all those like boxes and things click off when you do that. And like you said, I know I've bought some things that I'm not, as proud of, and you don't look at that card the same way.
Mhm.
There's not as much, you know, excitement, or at least for me, but yeah, so I just really, really think highly of your commitment to go all the way and go one step further and say, hey, I know I don't have as much self-control as I need. I'm going to delete eBay. So that's awesome, man. Kudos to you. And that's, very convicting to think about as I think about my own journey of what are ways, or, where in the fruit of the spirit have I missed the mark? I think as collectors, self-control probably is the one that rises up pretty high, but there's all kinds of different attributes of the fruit of the spirit that we need to think about as well. So I hadn't thought about it in that way. When I think of fruit of the spirit, I have like little kids songs ringing in my head right now, and my boys will like run around the house singing the fruits of the spirit. It's awesome. But yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing. But no, I'd love to hear kind of the rest of the story, kind of where you're at today.
Sure. So you go through the 20 teens, which is when all this sort of happened. And I was much more active on Net 54, meeting new people. Actually, through Net 54, met a friend that connected. Turns out he's a pastor. And he and I ended up clicking very, very, very largely. You know what I mean? He lives up in Raleigh, North Carolina. He is not on YouTube at all. He doesn't care about YouTube, which is fine, but he's still active on Net54. I went to his house many times. He's just he's a super good guy. He and I collected very similarly, and he and I connected, and I was like, I'm now meeting people in person, and we're sitting in his house. I'm sitting at his table. I'm looking at his cards. We're going to a card show together, and it was like I had never experienced that before. I had been to shows with my brother, but he didn't really care. He liked this and that. We weren't, it was different, and so through all this stuff though, my collection really didn't grow. Well, I guess it kind of did. I would go to this one card show every year up in North Carolina, and I would save all my money, and I would just oh my gosh, and I'd get some big stuff and I would get little stuff, and I got back into that accumulation phase. And I'm a big, if you've watched my channel, everybody knows I'm all about display. And I'm blessed to have this room, which is just my baseball room. And you see this wall behind me, but out of the four walls in this room, it's the only wall that's not covered in baseball cards. It just makes a good backdrop for me doing a video. So,
Yeah.
but I have cards all over. But in 2019, we'll just fast forward a bit. In 2019, my wife had uh, this may get tough, but she had an emergency surgery, and she actually had blockages in blood clots that had been lodged for years, literally years, in her ankle from an old ankle injury. They had switched some medication for her. It freed them. They raced up to her heart or near her heart, and they got lodged in her lungs. I'm trying to be very descriptive, but not too much, to where she had to have emergency open heart surgery to
My goodness.
remove the blood clots from her lungs. And this happened like literally. I went to work in the morning, and within an hour, I get a phone call from my daughter, who at the time was how old was she? 6. And she
Oh
said,
wow.
"Daddy, mommy needs you to come home. She fell," is what she said. And I thought, "Oh no, she fell down the steps or something." So I'm on my way home. I get home, and my daughter's on my front porch on the phone. And I said, "Who are you talking to?" She said, "They want to talk to you." And I said, "Hello?" And they said, "Are you, your name?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "This is 911. Your daughter called 911. The ambulance is on the way." I'm like, my daughter literally, she doesn't ever want to talk about this, but she literally saved my wife's life by knowing, staying calm, called 911, and they came, emergency heart surgery, moving on. Obviously, this was a major life changing moment for our entire family. My wife recovered and everything's fine. She's okay today. All this is great, but we didn't expect at that moment that would happen. And but the hospital she was in is about an hour away. So every day while she was in the hospital, I was back and forth, and I needed to get my mind off of this. So I already had some friends within the community through Net54, through some other things. One of them being Jake from Legends Never Die, who's a friend of mine. He had just started his YouTube channel. It wasn't very big, and I had never watched the YouTube video, but every day I would call him just to talk about baseball cards, just to not focus on what was going on. And at that moment, I realized if something happened to me, like my collection would be a complete burden for my family. It was so big and varied, from tons of worthless cards up to very, in my realm, high valued cards, and they didn't know the difference. I didn't have anything written down, and I thought, I don't want to do this to them. If something happened to me, I didn't want them to be burdened with my collection of trying to figure it out and all this other stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to now. Let's see. When I had sold off. I'll go through all the sell-offs I had, because I didn't mention one. I sold off the bulk of worthless junk. 30,000 cards. We talked about that. I sold off my 55 collection. I had sold off. I didn't mention it, but I did sell off my Hall of Fame collection, because again, it didn't bring me joy having it. It was more of the find. And now I'm like, I'm going to sell. But every one of those reasons, I had a need for the money. This time I'm like, you know what? I don't have a need for the money. I just don't want to burden my family. And I sold off a massive part of my collection to Jake. And if you go back way in Jake's videos, you'll see a series of videos where he talks about buying a collection, and he names the collection the Drew. Okay, which is how I got my YouTube channel name.
I
Is
didn't know that story. That's
so at
awesome.
that point, so if you go back into Jake's channel and you're like, he talks about the series of videos of all these cards he bought, and he names the Find, the Drew. At that point, as a joke, he continued to call me the Drew. And so when I started my YouTube channel, I was like, I got to come up with a name. And he's like, it can't be anything but the Drew. So it was. It was for about 5 or 6 months. And I was like, I don't like. It's not me. I'm not trying to be like, hey, I'm the Drew. It was. So I ended up adding on the vintage legacy part, but that's why my channel is called the Drew. So, but I sold that massive chunk off to him to get rid of my accumulation of cards that didn't mean a whole lot to me. And I decided that I was only going to have 100 cards in my collection, which is where I am today. Now, there is a few caveats to that. Okay, first of all, if I had completed a set, because I have a few sets that I love, that didn't count. So I have a 56 tops, a 53 Bowman set, a few other ones. Those don't count. If it's a player collector that I really love, I don't count those. So I'm a PB Reese guy, I'm a Carl Erskine guy, Stan Musial. I don't count those. But and my Griffies, I still have all my Griffies from Wago. Other than that, 100 cards is what I allow myself. So if I gain a card, I have to get rid of a card. And by doing this, and it's hard to do. It was easy at first because it's
That was
like,
my
well,
next question is how do you
how do you pick?
pull. That's right.
Well, it's easy when it was like, well, I'm getting this one massive card I can't imagine. I'm going to get rid of my Vladimir Guerrero rookie card. I can That's an easy swap. Well, I am
Right.
run out of those low hanging fruit, so to speak, cards to get rid of, and now it's a challenge. And I'm like, okay, now what do I do? So like, I have a couple cards that I would like to get coming up, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to take out? Like, I look. But literally, my entire collection is now on display in this room. So if anybody ever came and walked around and looked, you would see it. I don't have boxes I can pull out from under a table or tons of binders hidden everywhere. It's just this is it because I want to see what I have. So, but through all that, that's when I started on YouTube through Jake because I started watching his channel because he's a friend of mine. And then I remember one time he said, "Hey Drew, there's a guy I know. I think you would really like him. Check it out." And he sent me a link to a guy named Scott from Reindeer Studios, and he was doing a marker doodle of Carl Erskine to do a through the mail signing. Well, I'm a big Carl Erskine guy, and I watched this and I started watching Scott stuff. So for a long time, I watched two channels, Scott and Jake,
That, that's
and
awesome. We'll have to give both of them a shout out. Both of them are
sure,
great guys with great channels. So that's
yeah.
fantastic.
But then through that, he encouraged me, and I'm a storyteller. I like to tell the stories. And he's like, Drew, you just need to do a channel. I said, I don't have this massive collection. And and I'm used to looking at the Net 54, the guys with the six-figure collections.
Right.
And he's like, it doesn't matter. He said it's a different type of community. Nothing wrong with Net 54. It's a great place to learn. But I can't run with those guys, and I don't want to either. But he said, just tell your stories. He said, and I'm like, I think he was just tired of hearing my stories, to be honest. But so I'm like, okay. So I started a channel and I just started telling stories. And it'll be April, it'll be 4 years. I'm still just telling stories. I try to put out a video a week, some aspect of collecting, something I noticed in a card, something. And my collection has improved, but it has not grown since I started YouTube. So when I'm like, I got this new card, I don't always talk about, and I'm getting rid of this one, but I have been pretty constant to get rid of one to gain one. And I've gotten some really big cards, like for me, just unbelievable. And I've gotten rid of some to be able to afford that space, so to speak. But that way, if something happens to me, my collection won't be such a burden to my family, and that gives me a peace about knowing I'm keeping it within that self control. I've limited myself to 100 cards, and it's not exactly 100. It's closer to 120. It's basically what fits on my shelves,
Yeah.
but that's kind of where I am now.
That yeah. Well, that's again. Appreciate your self control there, but yeah, it's funny because my collection. I have a Google spreadsheet, and I think my entire collection is about 112 cards, so very similar.
Mhm.
But it is not out of wanting to stay small at all. It's more of just still feel like I'm dipping my toes into so many different projects. But yeah, so yeah, it's I mentioned many times on this podcast, my entire collection fits into like 2 small boxes, which is great. But I do think there is something to having yourself being organized in a way that is going to be a not a burden to your family or whoever else takes over your collection in the future. Because one day, spoiler alert, we're all going to move on from our collection. This is just a that's why I like the term, you curate a collection. We're not
Mhm.
the long-term owners. You always get, hear that person, they're like, well, I'm going to die in the grave with the card. I'm like, well, that's really sad. But no, we are all just temporary owners. And I think we need to treat it as such. It's like, yeah, I think and that goes back to like, we can't put our identity and worth into the cards we own. There's so much more than that in life. Do I love all these cards? Do I love all these cards that are on the back wall? Yes. I mean, I just did a top 25 video. And so when I kind of do videos that I get excited about, I rearrange my display case kind of based on that video. And so I just recently put my top 25 in the display case. And I love going to look at those cards because while they have the most value, it's actually funny because some people commented, they're like, I love, that you did your video based on cards you love and not value. And I'm like, actually, I did it on value. It just so happens that every single one of these cards in my collection have some unique piece and meaning to them. So I can relate, like you were talking about, is most of the cards that you own, Drew, do have a lot of like meaning and there's some type of purpose behind them. So I've really tried to emulate that in your collection. So that's always been something that I admire.
I appreciate that. And I think, you in knowing you and learning about you, I think you seem to have skipped that thing that so many of us have done. I'm not going to say struggle with because some people love collecting this way. And what I mean by that is you can go on eBay and be like you're looking for a specific thing. That's kind of what I do. I'm looking for this one thing. I'm talking about like you go on eBay and you're like, oh my gosh, Carlton Fisk, click. Oh my gosh, so and so, click, 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 and you're getting all these packages and stuff, and then you're like, and now what? I just spent whatever to get these cards that are gonna go in a box under a table or in a closet, and it's sort of like that's what I don't want to get back into. And
Right.
I'm not putting that down for some people. If they can afford that and they find the joy in that, then who am I to judge against that? I'm just saying for me, it always ended up empty at the end,
Right.
when I would find a card and be like, oh, I forgot I even had this. Why did I buy this? And I'm like, I spent real money on this, whether it was $1 or $100. I spent real money obtaining this thing, and now it's just a thing. You know what I mean? It means as much to me as say, my neighbor who doesn't care anything about baseball. It's just, oh, a card. What's it worth? What could I sell it for? And I don't like that. I want to. In a perfect world or something, a dream sort of thing. If somebody came to my house, let's say you were here and you came and you got to come up here, I want you to walk around and find any card and be like, "Hey, what's the story on this card?" And I can tell you the story. Not just like, "No, I don't know, he was pretty good," or "He's in the Hall of Fame," or "He's part of this set." But why do you have this card? Well, there's a reason, and that's what I want is to. It's a museum of my stories of why I have these cards. It's my legacy within the stories of these cards.
Man, that is fantastic. And to your point, every card that you own, I think is worth doing the legwork and the research on those players and their stories and preserving, some really rich history. And sometimes it doesn't mean it's like a Hall of Famer. It may just be some obscure card, to you, but to you in your collection, like there is deep meaning and value. It didn't have to be a card that everyone knows about. I don't know if you can think of an example of that in your collection, but I know for me, it's like I've got some very rare, obscure, like it didn't have to even be rare, but I've got some very quote unquote random cards to the community that I
Mhm.
love. They're like my Chariots of Fire collection that I can tell you for a fact I have never seen and never will ever see anyone in this community talk about. But I love them and I love sharing the stories about them. And that to me is where I get so much joy and excitement in the hobby. And it's fantastic. So man, yeah, I can't wait to come visit your little man cave there. That's awesome.
I'd love it.
That'd be fun one day, man. We'll definitely make that happen. And and correct me if I'm wrong, part of your collecting journey has not only been in cards, but now you've gotten to kind of merge some other passions of woodworking into kind of your collecting journey as well, right?
Yeah. So as far as the woodworking goes, I'll give a slight background. I haven't always been a woodworker. I've not like grown up in the shop kind of thing. But it does. The reason I have a shop and actually my own small business doing this is because of cards, and the reason is I in 2016 I went to the Hall of Fame with a group of friends, including that pastor. He went with us that I had mentioned earlier. I met it at 54. We went up to the Hall of Fame, and the reason is because Griffey was inducted, and he was my guy.
That's
And
awesome.
so I went up, and I have my Griffey stuff that I had accumulated over decades, and then I had gotten some special items at the Hall of Fame, and it was like a big deal. And I thought, you know what, I am gonna make quote the ultimate Griffey display. And I had always made displays for my stuff, just from hacking together what I could find. You know what I mean? Like it could be pallet wood and nails and crap, and it was just but it did what it was supposed to do. It got them up and I could see them. But I thought, you know what, for this Griffey thing, I don't want to just hack together some junky thing. I want to make it nice, but I don't know how to make it nice. So this was actually my first delving into YouTube, was watching woodworking videos. And it was like how to make a display case. And I'm watching, and then I find this guy and then this channel, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I never thought of that." I have a couple little, tools and a little shed, and I started like making these little things, and because I wanted to hone my skill to make a case that was worthy of my Griffey. I knew what I wanted in my mind. And but like card collecting, woodworking can be an expensive hobby. And I thought, well, you know what? If I do this, I've got to find a way to make money. So I started making little items and selling little items to try to pay for the woodworking, to improve my tools, to buy better wood. And little to my surprise, much to my surprise rather, people really liked my stuff, and I started selling stuff a lot. And all of a sudden I was like, well, dang, I wonder what I can do. So for about a year I was just making things and they were selling like crazy. And I learned a lot about not about business, because I already knew business, but like a one person business, and this crafting and art sort of thing. I'd never been in it, and it took off in 2017, and I created my little company. And I started doing like art shows and craft shows and woodworking shows, and it was just selling, and that became a huge part of who we were, my wife and I, because we did it together. And I got better and better at it, and more and more stuff, and on and on. And so to this day, I do have a woodworking business. I just told you before we started recording, I had my last show of this year last week. I almost sold out a product. It was an amazing show. I made, quite a bit of
Fantastic.
money. It was all great. However, even though I have now had built on my property a huge full woodworking shop, I have probably thousands of dollars worth of tools and wood, and it's this constant thing. I still have not built my ultimate Griffey display.
Oh
I still
wow.
know what I
Okay.
want, but I never built it. I still have the stuff. In fact, where I'm sitting across the room, I can still see the things I want in there on a table, but I've never built this display. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, as far as how that relates back to woodworking, about a year and a half ago, I was like, my budget in cards has always come from my collection. Well, for a long time, I could sell off that accumulation stuff that I had bought for literally pennies compared to now, pre-boom stuff. And well, I was running out of cards to sell that I wanted to sell. And I'm
Right.
like, well, in order to, but I have to do something. And I thought, you know what? I was now pretty deep into this card collecting community. what can I do? I was going to the National in 2024, and I thought, I'm going to make some card stands, like a little wooden stand that people can put a card in. And I took him to the National, and I sold tons of those things. I mean, I'll be honest, at the National, literally, I made close to $2,000 walking around selling these little wooden stands. Well, that was all card money. I had never had money like that. I'm picking up cards I had never. In fact, I'll show you one.
You're like doing a
Right
little
here.
this action.
But this card is a card stand money. And never did I think I'd be able to just walk up to a table and somebody say, "Hey, it's this amount of money," and I'm like, "Here you go," and I'm like, "I can't believe this is happening," because I had always nickled and dimed my way into my collection, and now I'm getting the big boys, so to speak. Well, since then, I still sell card stands. I get contacted occasionally. Hey, do you have any of these things? And I have some for sale all the time. And I don't try to push them as much as I could. I ended up making these racks. If you look back at my videos, I made these display racks and sold. I had a limited amount of those, but I sold those. And through those, because we're talking cards, because of those racks, I picked this card up.
That's a beautiful
I
DiMaggio.
would
Yeah.
I would never get this card or this card doing it the way I used to do, but because of woodworking, I was able to. And because of the woodworking, I'm going to Strongsville, which is where you and I will meet in person. This will be fantastic, and seeing that community. But it's funny going back thinking about things I've said. Uh, if anybody ever buys something from me and they want to pay with PayPal, I always say, well, I use my wife's PayPal address, and that goes all the way back to I still don't have a PayPal address from when I canceled it a long, long
That's
time
right.
ago. So if anybody's ever bought something, like, why doesn't he just use his own? Well, now you know the reason is because I refuse to have one because I got to keep myself in check. So anyway, that's kind of where it's come. I don't sell tons of them, just enough to continue in the hobby. Most of my hobbying is this. It's community. It's talking to people and getting to know people. I've gotten to know you a lot this year, but every year I've been in the YouTube community, I've got this massive list of people that some, have kind of come and gone, and some I'm very close to and continue to grow. But I know when I go to Strongsville, I can walk in and it's not that, hey, it's the Drew, but the point is that, hey, Drew's here, and I can give a lot of hugs and shake hands and walk around with people and look at what they're doing and talk life and cards and all this stuff. You and I have had many conversations that had nothing to do with cards. I've never met your wife, but I know her. I know your boys and your daughter. What I mean, just through community and life, and that's what I want. That's how this whole collecting thing has come down to what I really am enjoying. It's not gaining a ton of new items as much as it's building friendships that I've gotten because of the cards, and just being able to have real life conversations. Sometimes it's very serious, sometimes it's very light and stupid, but the point is it's just sharing life, and the common bond was old cardboard. But who cares about that? I want to know about you and your life. So
Yeah, and I think that that's a great challenge for anyone listening. It's, man, how can I grow in, my card community? How can I, go to that next level, if you will, as far as like friendships and relationships in the hobby. And there's so many ways to do that. Whether that's an avenue like Net54 was actually ironically where I kind of got the beginning of my card collecting community as well. So we share that bond, Drew. But you don't have to make a YouTube channel. You can. I encourage it. It's been amazing. You don't have to create a channel to connect with people. There's so many great ways to do that. And I think it's funny. I sound like a broken record about Strongsville. Someone, actually a close card collecting friend, but a guy had texted me and just said, well, you just are having all your Strongsville buddies come on the podcast. That's like a requirement to be on your podcast right now. I was like, no, that's not at all the case. I think it's telling though that all these people are going there because it's less about the cards. If I wanted to go to a bigger show, I can go to the Dallas show, and there's probably 50 to 100 tables that will have some type of vintage thing there, so I can scratch the itch there. That's not why I'm going to the show. I'm going to the show because I know there's going to be community. I know that we are going to be able to go that next layer and talk about cards and life and really connect on a much deeper level when I fly back to Dallas, it's going to be just this, man. It's not going to be about a single card that I'm getting, although there's a pretty good chance I'm going to have a Al Kaline in my back pocket, which I wouldn't be too mad about. But I really hope that I can leave just knowing, like, man, I got to spend time with really cherished friends. And I'm not talking about just card friends. I'm talking about guys that I would truly call real life friends that I've gotten connect with. And that's why it's been so fun connecting with you, Drew. We don't talk about, like, to your point, we talk about cards, but we talk about, what are things we're processing, some of the ups and downs in our lives. And that's been so refreshing this whole year for me, as I've kind of gotten to do a even more deep dive into that. And so again, I just said it, but I challenge anyone is go find community and go look for that. How would you say, Drew, I guess, where would you encourage people to go in terms of, like, how can they find kind of richer and deeper hobby community?
So, my experience is through YouTube, obviously, and I hear a lot of guys talk about, their Instagram, this and that. I don't do Instagram. So I can't talk to that. I'm sure there's a great community there, and I've heard a lot of great people talk about it. But if you watch these videos and you're like, oh, I really like this guy, or I like his collection, I like his style, or whatever, or her style, but you're like, I don't want to make a video. I don't have enough to show. First of all, um, people don't care about what you have. It's about getting to know you as a person. There is a massive community of support to be able to help you grow your channel. Not that that's the goal, but to grow it, not because of revenue stream, because I don't think any of us make money on this. It's more to a friendship stream. But if you're like, I don't know how to do it, or I stutter, or whatever you feel like your insecurities are on it, you don't want to do it, start commenting. Literally start commenting. And you'll find in a lot of our channel pages, you'll see emails addressed, like in our abouts. Email somebody. I've had a number of people that would never make a video. They emailed and say, hey, I watch your stuff, I really like it. There's a guy, I'll tell you two quick stories. There's a guy that I got an email from last spring, and he said, hey, I think you live near me. And I was like, that's weird. I really don't talk about specifics of stuff of where I live and all that. And he actually named the town, and I was like, this is kind of creepy. Well, then
Yeah.
he shared stuff with me and why he figured it out. And it turns out he only lives like 30 minutes from me, which is why he knew, through some description. And through email, we chatted, we ended up meeting. And now he watches every one of my videos, which he always had. But now when I see his name, I'm like, oh, I know who that is. And I know where he lives. And he's going to be in Strongsville. In fact, him and his wife are both card collectors. And he's going to Strongsville. He can't wait to meet people. He doesn't do videos. He doesn't have a channel. But he's so excited about this community thing just because he made a comment, he sent an email. The second person I want to mention, again, not a guy who makes videos. I don't really know much about him, but he emailed me and said, hey, I noticed that you're a Pee Wee Reese fan. And I haven't told many people about this, but he said, I know you're a Pee Wee Reese guy. He said, my dad actually played for the Brooklyn Dodgers system, and Pee Wee Reese gave him a jersey, like a game used Pee Wee Reese jersey from the
Wow.
50s.
That's incredible.
And he said, I'm getting older. I can't appreciate this. I have no one to give it to. Would you be interested in this thing, purchasing this thing? And I was like, oh my God, a game used 50 something. I didn't know much detail. Pee Wee Reese jersey. Are you kidding me? And so he and I talked, and I was like, I can't afford this. What I could afford would be really ripping him off. So it didn't work out. This was 2 years ago. And he stopped communicating, which was fine. I got an email from him last week, just this week. Hey, remember me? I just want you to know I put that jersey up in an auction. If you're interested, I hope you win it. And he sent me the link, and I went, and literally, you can go look at it. It's in the Sotheby's auction right now. It's a jersey from 1957. It includes a pair of his game used pants, and it said the estimated value will be between $20,000 and $40,000. So obviously, I saw your eyebrows go up. Well, obviously, while he hoped I had
For
it,
anyone listening, my eyebrows are absolutely raised. Yeah,
yeah.
that's crazy.
So obviously I will not be winning that, but the point is that he reached out to me first because he thought it would be cool for me to own something that was cherished from his family. And I thought that was really kind of really cool. You know what I mean? Like somehow I made a connection just through talking to a camera about baseball cards. But so my advice is start commenting, start to get to know people, send an email. Some guys may be more leery, some guys will be very welcoming, but there I guarantee no matter what you collect, who you are, your history, your life, your spot, your budget, anything, you will find somebody through YouTube that you can connect with, and through that person, you will find other people. Some of my best friends don't collect the way I collect. They don't collect vintage baseball only. You know, they collect modern stuff or football or non-sports or don't even collect. But I've met them through this community, and so that's my advice is just do something. You know what I mean? I really would love to see you create a channel and start to talk about yourself. But there are outlets where there are guys like, for instance, John 3D80s Kid does this series about 5 cards you must collect, and he tries to get guys that don't have channels on there. So you can get on there and you will follow his lead. You show some stuff and you talk a little bit, but it's just getting to know people. There's other guys that do collaboration videos and they take non-channel guys or guys with very small channels, but you just kind of have to get in there. And I'll tell you this, all of us are just people. When I met guys like Orlando or Sammy Thunder or Greg from Midlight Cards or Mike Baseball Collector, they are just people. Don't look at the number of how many thousands of subscribers or
Yeah. Who
or their
cares?
dollars of collection value. Don't They're just people. They make mistakes, they have regrets, they have joys, they have families, they have stories, they have a legacy that they want to share just like you and I do. Don't be intimidated by these people. Go up to them and just be like, "Hey, my name is whatever. I love your stuff." And I have not met like an arrogant, I can't stand that guy yet in this community. So there's my encouragement to you.
Man, that is yes, I hope everyone heeds that advice and really considers that. I'd encourage everyone send that text, send that email. You'll never know where that takes you. I remember I've gotten to connect. I remember the very first person that I connected with in person was because I just randomly sent a message on Net54 to a guy named Rich Klein and said,
Oh yeah.
"Hey, have you know good old Uncle Rich Klein?" I said, "Rich, I noticed you're 30 minutes north of me on your like little location thing that it said on Net54. Can I buy you a cup of coffee and talk cards?" And he was like, "Of course." And he's been you know, I call him a lifelong hobby friend now, and we'll go get coffee or lunch, multiple times during the year and just catch up, and it's always fun. So yeah, and I think we'll probably name this podcast the Finding Hobby Community, because I do think there's something so deep and important about finding hobby community, and when we do it, it takes our collecting and makes it much more rich and meaningful, and we find so much more joy and satisfaction because all of a sudden it's not about ourselves only it's about going through this life together, running this race together with people, and that is really where a lot of life can be found. Any final words, Drew, as we wrap this up?
No, I mean, my thing is, whether you have a channel or not, no matter how you collect, my advice would be try to define a little bit to give yourself a focus. And it's okay to have a very broad focus or have a number of different collections you're going on. But really do a self check every once in a while. Do that fruit check that I mentioned earlier and say, am I finding my peace? Am I finding my joy? Am I showing self control? Are you doing those things? And this is not a scolding of like, oh, shame on you for not doing that, but really keep yourself in check. And the reason I'm telling you this is not to limit your collecting experience, but actually to enrich it. And the way I look at it is it's like a tree. A tree. When you look at it, you see it, and it's got a trunk and leaves and stuff. That's the fruit check. You can see where it's you can see where it's flourished, and that's the visible thing. But there's a root system that goes so deep, and you don't know where it goes. It's more hidden, it's more broad. But think about any tree in a storm, and you're watching winds blow, and trees are heavy. I mean, I'm telling you, this is a woodworker, thousands and thousands of pounds, and they will just sway and move back and forth with the forces of nature. But because of the root system that's been built where you can't see it, it's what gives it its strength, its stability, and has allowed it to flourish, to let people see, other people see what, where its actual beauty is. It's not in the dirt and the roots, which are mangled and tangled. It's in the foliage and the fruit or the nuts or whatever it's producing. That's what people see, but it's because of that root system. So work on your root system, and you will always find joy in what other people can see.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of my wise friends has told me many times. The fruit comes from the root. It's like this little jingle that you can sing. But I agree. It's we do need to think about where our roots are, and when we do that, it will really help us produce more fruit in our collecting, in our life, and that is a joy. So thank you, Drew, and thank you to everyone who listened. Like we both talked about, man, if you want to connect, we would be overjoyed to connect with you. So Drew, is there, obviously go follow Drew on the Drew of Vintage Legacy, and we'd love to connect with you. Send us an email, reach out, and if you're interested in more about this podcast or connecting, let us know. And as always, thank you guys, and appreciate it, Drew. Appreciate your brother, and keep running the straight race. See you
Thank
guys.
you.